He recently made a discovery that shocked modern science.
My heart stopped. I said, this is really big.
He spotted traces of tetracycline, a modern wonder drug in bones 3,000 years old.
This is such a remarkable discovery. It's as if you were unwrapping a mummy and you saw a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses attached to the head. It was that unusual.
Scientists told Armalagos he must have made a mistake, and with good reason. Tetracycline is an antibiotic, not officially discovered until 1948.
What we had to do then was to explain how the tetracycline got into the bone.
Whatever got 20th century antibiotics into ancient bones must have been in the Egyptians' diet.
The tetracycline use was so prevalent in these bones that it had to be something that they were consuming every day.
They tried all sorts of ancient recipes with no luck. Then they found one that fit the bill.
And all of a sudden we came across the recipes for beer. So this gave us the possibility of beer being the source of the tetracycline.
Armalagos and his team brewed the beer according to the instructions of the 3,000-year-old recipe. Incredibly, when they tested it, it was full of the modern antibiotic.
And it's a definitive answer that this is tetracycline, and that they were getting the tetracycline from beer.
With the discovery, Armalagos was vindicated, and the world of science was forced to accept the fact that ancient beer beat modern medicine by 3,000 years.
It's just mind-boggling.
Officially, it was this grumpy-looking man, Alexander Fleming, who discovered antibiotics in 1928, winning the Nobel Prize. But now it's time the real winner gets its share of the glory. Step forward, beer. Coming up, how beer saved millions of lives in the Middle Ages. Since caveman drank that very first drop, beer has created civilization, pioneered inventions like math and writing, and built the pyramids. But now it faces its biggest challenge yet: keeping people alive in medieval Europe, when life was nasty, brutish, and above all, short.
The chances of living to age 6 was probably somewhere around 50%.
Warfare, plague, but there's another killer: water.
Rivers were foul. Sewage went into them. The offal from butcher shops. Tanneries dumped their waste into the rivers. The water was completely undrinkable, and if you drank the water, you got sick.
Dr. Charlie Bamforth is professor of brewing science at the University of California, Davis.
How you make it is actually important.
He believes beer saved millions of lives in medieval Europe, and he wants to prove it.
We wanted to come up with an experiment which showed that the fundamental brewing process removed the microorganisms, the bacteria that would make people sick.
Bamforth and his colleagues decide to brew up a typical medieval beer. First, they take water from a duck pond and test it in a lab.
This is a test that's used in the food industry to see if a food has contamination of fecal coliform bacteria.
Fecal sounds ominous.
These are the bacteria like E. coli that cause really serious illness. The pond water was just loaded with this type of bacteria.
Water with a twist of duck poop. It's a killer, just like medieval times.
This water is not safe to drink.
Now, using a medieval recipe, Bamforth's team brews up a 1,000-year-old beer in a modern lab.
We ground up the malt and mixed it with this water. And then after a period of an hour or so, then we collected the liquid, separated it off from the residual grains, and then we boiled it.
They let it ferment for a week. Now the results of the experiment. Is the beer safe?
After making the pond water into beer, I tested the sample again and found no evidence of any fecal coliform bacteria, making it safe to drink.
A miracle transformation. Deadly water into drinkable beer. Of course, we know today that the boiling killed the bacteria. But medieval people had no idea. They just did it to make beer more tasty, accidentally saving millions of lives.
Life in the Middle Ages must have been pretty miserable. So beer absolutely would be the safest drink to consume.
It worked for medieval man, but what does the 21st century think of this beer?
Something that's perfumey a little bit about this.
It's salty.
Tastes like nutmeg or something.
It's good. I like it.
Then we revealed the source of the beer.
Is that a joke? It's not?
Duck pond water? Well, I guess the ducks are doing pretty good then, right?
That's gross.
Pond water was lethal, but people could still drink like fish in the Middle Ages, thanks to beer. And everybody but everybody joined in.
Everyone drank beer. They drank beer from the cradle to the grave.
By the 16th century, people got through 300 liters of beer per year. Every man, woman, and child. That's 6 times what we drink today. Yes, that's right. 6 times. With demand like that, beer was liquid gold, and the group cashing in was the monks.
The church didn't just make money off of beer, the church grew wealthy off of beer.
In medieval Europe, monks were the master brewers, and beer was a godsend.
People naturally went to church because you were promised afterward that you were going to get a beer.
The Holy Alliance of Beer and Bibles packed pews for centuries. But not even the church could monopolize ale forever. The beer business attracted a new breed, entrepreneurs. They took over brewing, and in the process, transformed Europe.
Beer brewing was a critical factor in the development of the economy. It was a spearhead in the creation of trade, commerce, banking, finance.
In other words, the creation of modern capitalism. And they still celebrate beer in Europe today. Coming up, how beer crosses the ocean and helps establish America. America, land of the free, home of the brave, and built on beer.
Beer is the secret history of America. It's in our DNA.
Many of America's founding fathers had one thing in common. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Sam Adams were all brewers. Together, they fermented a nation. Along with Benjamin Franklin, for whom beer was more than just a drink. It was evidence of divine order in the universe. In his words, beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Upon such inspirational messages, great nations are formed. But without beer, the first settlers might never have made it to America aboard the Mayflower.
Beer was vitally important on the Mayflower. Water would spoil in the hold of a ship, whereas beer was naturally preserved by alcohol and hops, and it would stay fresh throughout the voyage.
Beer kept the settlers alive on the voyage and determined the site of the founding colony. The Mayflower was headed for Virginia, but tragedy struck. The ship ran out of beer, so they landed at the nearest point, Plymouth. Even then, beer was all they would drink.
The Pilgrims come ashore. Why aren't they drinking the water? Well, they knew that back in England that if you drank water, you get sick.
Though America's streams were pristine, the settlers wouldn't touch water unless it was made into beer.
Beer was an absolute essential item for their survival.
When the beer supply ran out, the colony hung in the balance. The settlers had to find a way of making beer, but they had no barley or hops. Until squirrels came to the rescue. Sounds nuts, but they gave settlers the idea of using acorns. And it worked. Acorn beer kept Plymouth alive. With Plymouth safe, in the 17th century, beer went on to open up the rest of America by establishing an extraordinary communications network, the Internet of the age. Before Google, Twitter, and Facebook came the tavern.
The tavern was a center of commerce. It was a communication hub. It was the place where people passed information back and forth.
Taverns connected up America and turned a colony into a nation. Because next, beer inspired one of the great events in human history. The American Revolution. On December 16th, 1773, the struggle for freedom from the British began here, in the Green Dragon Tavern, Boston.
Sons of Liberty are gatherings, and they've been talking about how oppressed they are. They have a beer, they talk some more treason. They have another. You can feel their passions rising. You know something's going to happen that night. This is the time. Let's do it.
The Sons of Liberty made for Boston Harbor, boarded ships and dumped tea. The revolution was on, and the taverns held center stage.
The taverns became centers where revolutionary activity was discussed and debated and plotted and planned.
Beer's role in the birth of America was so vital. It's fitting that the national anthem was borrowed from an 18th century drinking song. The words have changed, but the tune's the same. Back then, it was a sobriety test. If you could sing the song, you were okay for another round. Today, it's the Star-Spangled Banner. Beer helped found America and gave the young nation its anthem into the bargain. Coming up, beer heals the sick and gives us a treat. With the War of Independence won, beer was free to take on its greatest challenge of all, disease.